Hello, my name's Mark Geary, and you're listening to You Think That's Funny, which is either an accusation or a question, depending on your mood. Oh, before we start this week's show, I should say you can go to youthinkthat'sfunnypodcast.com to check out links that are the background to what we will discuss in this week's show. That's youthinkthat'sfunnypodcast.com. On this week's show, we have Andy Ross. Andy is a writer and is also an accomplished illustrator and live performer, and has also run a humorous reading series in New York, where he lives. Say hello, Andy, please.
Hello, Andy. No, I'm not. Hello, Mark. How are you? Hi. How are you
Hey.
doing?
I'm just dandy, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good. My disclosure for this show is that Andy is a friend and colleague of mine in comedy for over a decade. We actually worked on a sitcom pilot that almost but didn't quite win something, so that was exciting and is a fond memory of mine. And I do find what Andy finds to be funny myself, but we do have a little interesting humour contretemps that I think will be interesting to talk about later. Right, Andy?
Yes, I don't know what contretemps means, but I'm sure that we will talk about that.
It's French for a right royal Donnybrook, or whatever that is.
Okay, and then
That's,
whatever that is.
yes, and that's and that's
No,
how.
I know what words mean. I'm just kidding.
Ooh, look at Mr. Fancy with his knowing what words mean.
I know
Okay.
a certain percentage of words.
Alrighty, so let's get into the agenda, shall we, of what you find funny. So the first thing you had mentioned were funny names. Can you give us the background on that, please? An
Sure.
explanation and the background.
Okay. So I find ridiculous names really funny for some reason. And when you asked me to think of what I find funny, I thought of that and I was like, well, why do I find that funny? And I went back to thinking about when I used to read Mad Magazine or the Mad Magazine collections, and there was the Don Martin things, and he would always have ridiculous characters named like Phone Bone or Fester Bester or whatever. And I think that that kind of stuck with me. And then I was a big fan of Kids in the Hall, and Kids in the Hall had 30 Helens Agree, and these are the Daves I know. And there's something just ridiculous about names, like people having the same name or people having ridiculous names, or like I love names. And for years, my wife and I would collect silly names that we found in real life. And she had her mother had a coworker named Vicky Clutterbuck, and that was her actual name. And so we'd like write it down, and then when we were waiting um for like if we were waiting for a table at a restaurant, we would just talk in silly names to each other, like Duncan Knuckles or Gertie Nerdlicker or whatever. And over time, and then we collected this name. We were I hope it's okay that I've just jumped into story time, but I find names so funny. And we were at the Met Opera because you know that I am pretentious. And so we were at the Met Opera watching the opera. And I don't love the opera. I like have a really hard time staying awake, but we were there and we're looking through the names in the program, and the head graphic designer was named Burns Magruder. And I just thought Burns Magruder was absolutely the funniest, most perfect name. And so I wrote this. I used to have a blog. I wrote this blog about funny names. And Burns Magruder must have had a Google alert set up for his name because he found the blog and commented on it. And then I also had this reading series called Real Characters in New York that ran for years and years. And then he like would come and sit in the front row, and I would sometimes reference Burns Magruder and his husband Earl. And I love silly names so much.
Did he have fun with it, or did he glare at you the whole? Did he have his name on his T-shirt, like "I
No,
am Burns Magruder," and just glare at you?
no, he had fun with it. He has a good sense of humor, despite being like a very fancy man. Like he is someone
Hmm.
who lives up to the name Burns Magruder and has photos on his Facebook of him on yachts wearing scarves with his husband traveling the world. Um, but he's also very funny.
Yeah.
So he has that patrician humor, and I think it's amazing. And to double down on this pretentiousness, I have prepared a reading of a Washington Irving short story that I find incredibly funny that
Okay.
involves funny names. Are you interested in this?
Yeah. Well, let me ask a question first. Did
So
you
no.
read? No, no, I am. But before I forget, because I'm old and
Mhm.
forgetful. Before we go to the reading, which we absolutely will do, did you read much Dickens in school? Because Dickens has these ridiculous names in it, and our English teacher explained why at one time, and I can't for the life of me remember. She said like Dickens did these names because, and I really wish I remembered it now.
I did read Dickens, and I know that he has funny names, and I maybe it's that same thing. He in his books, the mean and bad characters are always ugly, and he always talks about how ugly they are.
Yeah.
And maybe it has something to do with that. Like, he was like high and low, right? He was both high and low art, right? He was very
Yeah.
popular, and so maybe it was that kind of hoi polloi um, plebeians thing where there were funny names for the people who weren't getting the top level, and there were, and smart people find funny names funny too.
As evidenced by you, Andy Ross.
Incredibly smart person.
Yeah. So let's do
No,
the
I changed
reading.
my name. That's actually my name. You didn't say my full name. I added incredibly smart person. It's on my social security card. So
Reading
I am
time then.
I am a little pretentious. I'm gonna read you this thing.
Okay.
This is so Washington Irving, he uh beginning of America, he wrote who's the guy who sleeps for a long time?
Ah, Rip Van Winkle.
Rip Van Winkle. So he wrote with Rip Van Winkle, but he also wrote this thing, which is long, and I'm going to read just a paragraph on it. It's called From a History of New York by Diedrich Knickerbocker, and it's about the Battle of New York.
Hmm.
So it's the Dutch coming, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to read you this part. And he's talking about the Dutch cresting the hill in the battle against Washington, George Washington. Then came waddling on the sturdy chivalry of the Hudson. There were the Van Wycks and the Van Dykes and the Ten Eycks and the Van Nesses and the Van Tassels and the Van Grolls, the Van Housens and the Van Giesens and the Van Barclomes and the Van Warts, the Van Winkles, the Van Dams, the Van Pelts, the Van Rippers, the Van Brunts. Then there were the Van Horns and the Van Hooks and the Van Bundershans and the Van Gelders and the Van Arnsdales and the Van Bummels, the Van Belts, the Vanderhoofs, the Vanderverts, the Vanderlins, the Vanderpools, and the Vanderspiegels. Then came the Hoffmans and the Hooglins and the Hoppers and the Kloppers and the Reichmans and the Dykmans and the Hogbooms and the Rosebooms and the Uthouts and the Quackenbosses and the Rohrbachs and the Gandervises and the Bensons and the Browers, the Waldrons and the Onderdukes, the Van Vangers, the Schlemmelhorns, the Stenderbergs, the Bingerhoffs, the Benderkoots, the Knickerbockers, the Hofstrassers, the Ten Breechers, and the Tough Breechers, with a host of more worthies whose names were too crabbed to be written, or if they could be written, they would be impossible for man to utter, all fortified with mighty dinner, and, to use the words of the great Dutch poet, brimful of wrath and cabbage.
Brimful of Wrath and Cabbage was the remix of the Corner Shop song, right?
Yeah. Anyway, the first time I read that, I was in college and I was like, oh my God, that is so funny. That is so fundamentally ridiculously funny. Weird names and that they represent people, and that they're all real names. They're likely all real names
Mm-hmm.
that he collected over time. And then whenever I stop at the Schemmerhorn stop on the A train,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, we just all agree that this word that has way too many consonants, we're just gonna say it every day.
Huh. I've never been to the Schermerhorn stop, so that's never hit me up yet. But yeah, well, I got to tell you this: you're the first person we've had that said names were funny. So
Good.
top job on that. That's a good
Thank you.
one. Let's go. But while we're talking of names, so I wanted to purloin your intro, and I got lazy, and I was like, oh, I'll just go to Andy's website. So
Yeah, that's
first,
old.
first of all, well, I obviously I tried finding them just the obvious ones first. So have you been to andyross.com recently?
No, I don't even know who that would be. Oh
Okay, it's
God.
great. It's the only reason I'm bringing it up is so AndyRoss.com is basically a star-spangled banner wrapped around a person doing like it's insane. Like it's like how much patriotism can I jam into this thing? And then I thought
I'm
that's
looking
clearly
now.
not Andy. And then I went to AndyRoss.net and he's this British anti-Brexit hippie who like takes long nature walks and talks about like socialism and stuff. So I was like, man, Andy Ross has a lot of breadth to the Andy Ross universe.
Well, Andy Ross is also one of the members of OK Go, and he destroys my Google search results,
Yeah, I got
which is fine. I can be kind of anonymous online,
yeah.
and that's fine by me.
That's good when you're looking for jobs. I mean, I got there's a Mark Geary Irish folk singer, so he's just you will not find me. I'm buried under Irish folk singery in a Google search for sure, for sure. But yeah, just the sheer breadth of Andy Rossness. I thought I had to bring that up because we were talking about names.
And
Um,
my name is incredibly unfunny. Like Andy is probably the least funny name.
mm, yeah, I guess. Well, do you,
The
oh,
child's
I just
name.
remembered I sent you an album that I found by an Andy Ross.
You did a long time ago.
Yeah, I just remembered that one. Anywho, let's get on to item number two because it's going to be a juicy one. You picked scatalogical humor as a thing and one specific routine. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, when years ago, when Jon Stewart still was on The Daily Show, he would tour every once in a while doing stand up, and but in like big places. So it was we went to, and I guess I don't even know, but it was some like Coliseum maybe. And he told a story about his cat getting diarrhea and getting scared by its own diarrhea. And so it jumped up onto the counter and onto the top of the refrigerator and then was just machine gunning the entire kitchen with diarrhea. And there was no way for him to stop it. And he was like holding up garbage can lids to try and approach the cat to get it off the fridge. And when he was telling that story, I was dying with laughter. Like my stomach hurt. I would like my fists were clenched, and I was just trying so hard to be alive in the moment. I thought I was dying because I was laughing so hard. And that has come up over and over again, like in movies that aren't even, or like whatever, that's not even good. Like Bridesmaids is a solid little movie. It's fine. But when they eat bad Mexican food and try on wedding dresses and then shit in the sink and shit in the road, I just think I found that so funny. Now, if I watch that movie again, would I laugh at that moment? I don't know.
Huh.
But the first time I see something that's scatological, the first time I experience that, it is the funniest thing to me in the world.
Huh. Well, what about when I think of scatological, it's not technically scatological. It's the fart scene in Blazing Saddles. I remember
Absolutely.
my friend literally fell off the chair, and I thought he was never gonna catch his breath from laughing at that.
So that was like the first time that they even allowed the sound of a fart in movies, right?
Oh wow,
So talk about if humor is the unexpected, right?
yeah.
If humor and I kind of think that it is. I think that humor is like 99% surprise. Uh, if like that moment and being in a movie theater seeing that would have just been you would have never experienced anything like that before, right?
Yeah.
And then they would put it on TV when I was growing up, and they would cover up all the farts with horse whinnies because it was okay to have it
What?
in a
How
movie.
do you
Yes.
pass that off?
I don't know, and it didn't work. Like you'd be like, here's, and it's like a 3 minute scene of them farting.
Yeah.
But when it was on TV, it would just be all these sounds of horse whinnies. And so, like, not only did they kill the joke, but like, why even show that if you're not going to have that joke in?
Yeah. That
But
was the
I grew up
first
on
time.
Blazing Saddles. I until by the time I was 8, I could speak the entire dialogue of Blazing Saddles.
That was the first time on film they allowed the noise of a
Farting
fart.
sound.
I did not
Yeah.
know. Blazing Saddles is this like weird, like gold mine of weird facts. Like, so it was an eye opener to me when someone said to me, "Oh, Richard Pryor wrote that." He was so out of control at that point that they couldn't let him make it, and it was given to Mel Brooks, and that just left my jaw drop. It
No, no, he
explains a
was a
lot.
writer on it. He didn't write it.
Well, I think it was meant to be his vehicle. This is how it. Maybe we need to fact check this, but someone
Oh, I
told me.
believe that it was maybe he was intended to be cast in it, but
Oh,
he was brought in as a writer.
hmm.
But there were tons of writers, and he did not end up writing any of the parts about African American life. He wrote all the Mongo stuff.
Oh, right. See, the gold mine continues to deliver uh, on Blazing Saddles. I already learned two things today from Blazing Saddles. Anyway, I did. You're a father yourself, so I did some research
Mm.
on this because I want to get into the science of laughter with these things, as pretentious as that is. And here's what I found on poop humor. The New York Times. Lawrence Cohen, PhD, comments children are always experimenting with power and getting adults to laugh or be awkward. That's a very powerful thing to a child. So for children aged 3 to 6, that's a big thing. It's a power. As a child, poo
Sure.
humor is which kind of blew my mind, but I guess it makes sense. Oh, I've jumbled up on my text here. Laura Markham, PhD, in the same New York Times article says, um, children ages 3 to 6, bathroom accidents are high on the list of things causing them anxiety. Um, we take it for granted as adults that we can make it to the bathroom on time, but kids still do not have that confidence. So part of poo humor for children is an anxiety release. So do you think that's carrying into adulthood? I was
You know,
thinking.
you're talking about my kids, and there's one in the hallway playing with a cat that is making sounds like a little animatronic cat that I'm gonna yell at so that she stops. Um, but yes, gosh, I think that that is all 100% accurate about kids. Um, and kids having like, oh my God, you've opened my eyes. There is that stuff like people talk about Freud and him talking about how people have a scat phase in development, but it's very likely that it was just that Freud was into scat. Um,
Yeah, it would seem in keeping.
yeah, because like we have all this psychological stuff, but it's really just that Freud was so fucked up, right?
Well, he was
But
German, or was he Austrian? German, right?
that's all the same, right?
Well,
I don't
definitely
know.
skeletons in the closet.
Um, the stuff about kids always testing boundaries and the stuff about how there's anxiety around going to the bathroom. Yes, that is very funny, and I will think about that more. I'm trying to think about like other like humor and like archetypal humor. They're the trickster characters, right? Like Hermes and all that. Um, and Hermes, like a Herm, is a giant penis, and so whenever there were statues of Hermes, it was he would have like a giant penis, and there must be something there about like bodily function and humor going back forever and being a part of like the liminal between what's allowed and what's not allowed and what is right and what's not right.
It's boundary testing, certainly for kids anyway. Alrighty, so here's the big one. Let's move along. We're good pacing here.
Good.
Um, so the big one that you'd sort of pre-warned me you were gonna talk about as a big fun thing is enthusiasm. I'm gonna say enthusiasm slash niceness is something that you heartily believe in comedy, and
Yes.
it definitely makes you laugh. So explain yourself, young fella, me lad.
Okay. So if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, I think that Ted Lasso is a revelation, and I have a feeling like you might not like it, but I think 99% of the people out there would love it so much. And I have no reason to sell this television show. I'm not connected to it at all. But when I watched it, I found it so funny and I was so filled with joy at something different and new. Now, I think that Parks and Rec played a lot with the humor around enthusiasm and love, and certainly that Chris character on Parks and Rec is supposed to be like it's funny that he is like a golden retriever come to life. But something about Ted Lasso like brings it all together, and I really think that it has to do with why I find that so funny is that it is a big surprise to me that someone could react with positivity and kindness at every turn, because we are still dealing with the popularity of Seinfeld in America totally upending everything and making it so that the only thing that was allowed to be funny was people being cruel and vicious for years and years and years. That's the only thing that was allowed to be funny. And now we're finally like turning a corner and you're allowed to be funny through being kind.
Hmm.
What do you think?
Well, I've had a theory for years, and this is probably a reflection of me rather than the general humor. But to me, the only things that I ever found utterly hilarious were the real nasty characters. Like to me, the bigger and the obliviousness of that has to be part of it as well. Although they can be aware, like I think the towering creation in comedy is Blackadder. Like it had everything in it, and it's based around a character totally and utterly without any redemption whatsoever. And then there was characters like the character of Rick on The Young Ones, played by Rick Mayall, was the ultimate funniness for me. Is someone who thinks they're good and nice, but clearly isn't, and that's obviously the sort of irony or whatever of it. And I really do find it hard to laugh at things where people are nice in them, because I'm like, what is this telling me?
Well, that's funny because I'm the exact opposite. And so, like, okay, so I don't have the depth and breadth of knowledge of British humor as you. But let's look at like someone who is objectively not nice, and that's Steve Coogan. All right.
Yeah,
So I know him and I know his work. And my favorite Steve Coogan stuff is The Trip,
yeah.
where I mean, he's not a nice character, but the only actual funny parts of that are when he's being friends with Rob Brydon,
Yeah.
and they have a natural, easy friendship through all the. But like the parts that are supposed to be funny of him being awful, I don't find funny. And and all the Alan Partridge stuff, I know that there's gonna be like actual hate mail, but I think it's fine. I think Alan Partridge is fine.
Man, we can't tread around Partridge. I'm gonna have to leave the room and
But
suspend the podcast.
but I found I there are I liked I like 24-hour party people and Tristram Shandy where he's human. I like the moments when he's human,
Yeah,
but the parts where he's not human
yeah.
are just like, okay, that's a cartoon.
Huh. Because he actually said in an interview, he said, Partridge is everything in myself that I hate amplified. It's all of my pomposity that I know I shouldn't have, and all of the opinions that I know I shouldn't have amplified. So I think that's a good, it's a catharsis for him, right?
Maybe, but it's not for me. Um, and
I was asked to explicitly bring up, by the way, when Ted Lasso came up, the subject of Scrubs.
oh sure, I liked Scrubs, and also because the guy who created Scrubs created Ted Lasso or co-created it, and he also created Cougar Town, which I didn't like, but has been recommended to me.
Yeah,
And I love the friendship on Scrubs. I think that that's really like the positivity that those two guys greet each other with,
hmm
and and I just like it is so fundamentally funny to me, but it also I think what it is that it brings me joy while I'm surprised. Like it's not just the joy. I think that humor for me is a lot about the joy of surprise, and that's what the scatological stuff was just like being shocked. But then to add on a level of I am experiencing this surprise, but I'm also experiencing like pleasantness and kindness at the same time.
hmm. Yeah, I
So
can see that. That I see the surprise element for sure. So cool. So you are a person who loves the positivity coming through in comedy as well, right? Of the hey, we nice guys can win.
I don't, yeah, but I don't need nice guys to win. I just need there to be, um, so I think that there's a lot of different kinds of comedy.
Yeah.
And we have been in this era for a long time of satire
hmm
where things are torn down.
Yeah.
And I find so much fulfillment in knowing that there can be comedy that builds up as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like you have that in all aspects. You have that in music, in film, and
Hmm.
comedy has dwelled in the negative for a very long time, right? So give it its time in the positive.
Yeah, and it's probably there's always been negativity in comedy. There's always been ridiculousness in comedy. There's
Hmm.
always been positivity in comedy. But there are uh, waxes and wanes, and there are tides that shift.
Hmm.
And I'm ready for more Good Place and more Ted Lasso in the
Yeah.
world.
Okay. Well, that segues nicely into our next topic, actually. So I want to talk about how the things that you personally find funny, how have you seen them manifest in yourself, in your artistic output, in your being?
Well, that's interesting. Um, You knew me in Chicago when I was a stand-up, and I was very nervous on stage and very heady. I think I had really funny jokes. I think
Mm-hmm.
I was a great writer, but I had little to no stage presence. Um, as I've spent time in New York doing other things, I came here and quit stand-up pretty early,
Mm-hmm.
almost immediately. But then I did find The Moth and did The Moth for a few years, like regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and have since done storytelling shows. And then I had my own show where I would do a reading series and brought on a lot of famous people to read their
Yeah.
things. Um, before they were famous, of course.
Can you send me
And
their email addresses for podcast
oh,
purposes?
I was part of a big email.
Oh,
I think
that.
you
Yeah,
probably were too. Yeah.
I was on that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
good one. Anyway,
Anyway,
sorry I
um,
interrupted you. Carry on.
no, no, it's fine. But in hosting that, I started to lean into being incredibly positive, like
Yeah.
incredibly um, thinking of performance as you are the host of that moment. You are like the host of the party in that moment. And then it all clicked. And so when I was hosting my show, I was incredibly positive and like rah rah, get everybody on board. And I don't know if you know, but I host bingo at Bryant Park in the summer. And
Nice.
so I usually have around 400 to 600 people all playing bingo. And when I'm doing that, I am being as over the top positive as possible, like camp counselor, getting everybody to sing along level of positivity. And so
Oh.
I guess I unintentionally brought that into my own performance.
Oh, cool. I gotta send you. There's a link I could have sent you then, where it's a bingo caller in England who's like a superstar, like the star bingo call. Yeah, I think you'll get a kick out of it. You've probably seen the Saul Better Call Saul bingo pieces, right?
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
great. Yeah, nice. I never knew you to be a bingo caller. That's
It's a lot
almost.
of fun.
We could have another show on that. Trust me. So any other thing to add on that about incorporation?
Incorporation of what I find funny.
Yeah,
I don't know. I've never written anything that's really scatalogical, but I
yeah,
should. Um, and um, and then I have written pieces where everybody has funny voices and funny names.
yeah.
But that's just because I'm really good at funny voices, and funny names kind of come from funny voices because it's like the auditory experience of comedy is important, right?
Hmm.
Uh, having knowing when to include alliteration or rhyme or knowing how to edit and like comedy is an auditory experience
Hmm.
except for like silent films where you can see slapstick physical humor.
Yeah,
Aside from that, almost all comedy comes from what you're hearing,
on the voice.
and
Yeah,
so I think that funny names is like a tool in that toolkit.
yeah. Oh, talking of which, so I had sent you a couple of links. Obviously, I've known you for a long time, so
Hmm.
I was trying to be a little more challenging in reading. There was a series in England called Look Around You, which was a parody of kids' science shows. I'm not sure if
Yes.
you were probably already familiar with that, right? Because
I
you're
was
the
I
kid.
was
Yeah.
familiar with that and Brass Eye and
Yeah.
that and those kinds of shows. Yeah.
But the high points of Look Around You for me was they always gave people weird names, and the one I remember most is a Mark Heap character called Leonard Hatred, which is they used like adjectives and stuff for the names in that. Do you remember that? Because the names in it were always so good in Look Around You.
I think again you can be mad. I think that look around you is fine.
Oh no.
I think it's a lot of like I think it's a lot of smart people coming up with their first idea and thinking that's good enough. I'm inherently funny. But it's never like those it's never like the third or second level of
Yeah.
like toying like working the joke until you get to the third level that people can put together 2 plus 2. It's always that they're just always giving you 4.
Well,
You like hate me right now, but
no, no,
I
no.
think it's
It's
fine.
interesting. No, no, it's interesting. Because of the other clip I sent you, and I'm guessing you would hate this, but I was just crossing my fingers. Was a Stuart Lee clip. Stuart Lee is to me is the comedy god of the last 5 years. I mean, his stand up is so much better than everyone else. But he did the scatalogical thing about the cat pooing into the Union Jack.
Yeah, now I watched that and I think it's funny, but I didn't laugh at it
No.
because um, he didn't seem to be having fun. And to me, I only actually I appreciate humor when someone is being like a craftsman
Mm.
and but if someone's trying to be cool while they're being funny, I don't find it funny.
Ah,
And I
interesting.
think of him as someone who's very interested in being cool while he's being funny.
Huh. Well, yes. No.
We
Is
have
good.
disagreements. We have
Yes,
disagreements.
we have disagreements. Well, I think that was actually all that was on the agenda today. And we've paced it out about right. So I just wanted, we'll end up in a typical podcast style. Talk about if you want to, if you have upcoming things you're doing that you think would be interested, what do you got to
Okay.
say about them?
Well, it's a pandemic.
Yeah.
So I have been working at my job
Mm.
and working some freelance illustration gigs and raising my two kids in a tiny Brooklyn apartment. And so maybe when the pandemic is over, I will have
Yeah.
something to plug. But right now, I'm just going to plug survival. Everybody try and survive. Hopefully, we'll all get a vaccine,
Yeah.
and one day we'll all have a big party where the ones of us who haven't died will all I'll write a piece of funny names for us all.
Okay, let's do that. All right. Well, thank you very much, Andy. It's great
Mark,
to
you're a
hear
dream.
from you as usual. And we'll segue seamlessly into some jangly guitar music. And
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being had. It was lovely. And now the jangly guitar music and my pre-recorded outro. Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you.